If it was her body, then her body would be the one aborted, not the baby's.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm super excited to have this next guest on. She talks a lot about one of the things that I'm very passionate about when it comes to the ideas in politics. And I just really want to hear her take. I think she's a super intelligent young person who's been doing a lot online. She has a YouTube channel. She's an ambassador for live action and so many other things. So without further ado, Lala Ramirez, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Angel, so much for having me on. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. I've been actually watching your videos on YouTube and I've been obsessed. So I'm so grateful for everything that you do as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. So I want to, for the people that are watching, I want them to get to know you a little bit. Maybe you can give us like a little elevator pitch of, what you do, who you are, what got you into politics, that whole spiel.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so a lot of people are shocked to hear this, but I'm actually not. I wasn't born in America. And so my family actually immigrated from Colombia when I was at the age about 6 years to 7 years old. And we came seeking political asylum because although Colombia is not one of those countries that are as bad as, let's say, Cuba, Venezuela, etc., it's heading that way. And so we wanted to get out of there as soon as we could. And so we decided to come here. And my family, really, I grew up in a very apolitical family. We didn't talk much about politics at all, which is kind of funny considering how I'm so much involved in it. But it wasn't until really I started to get very serious about my faith, and so did my parents, that politics started to be a subject that now we would discuss. And so growing up really in the public school system, I viewed myself as more of a liberal leaning into more left-leaning things. And I wasn't, again, I come from the Catholic Church. I was born into the Catholic Church, but I didn't really practice my faith. And so that kind of also made me lean more towards the left, since my friends were leaning more towards the left. The school taught me to lean more towards the left. So it was just kind of inevitable that I was going to be more left leaning. But the one thing that I always had was my core pro-life views. I don't know where that really stemmed from, but as like from back as that I can remember, even being a little child, like I just always was pro-life. Like that wasn't even a thing that just made me question. I was just always it. And so growing up, I thought everybody would be pro-life, even going to church and stuff. I just thought like I was just this naive kid and thought, okay, this is a subject that I think we can all get behind on. And once I started going, to school and started to hear my friends talk about more politics, the abortion debate, everything, I quickly came to the realization that that is not the case. In fact, culture seems to be more pro-choice and more favorable of abortion than I actually thought. And so that really made me question what I believe, why do I believe it, and how can I share this conviction to other people.
Right.
And when I started to get really serious about my faith, kind of going into sophomore, junior year of high school, I started to take politics very, very serious. So I started to look at things happening around the culture. How can I integrate my faith into culture? Because I feel like that's what we're here to do as Christians. We're here to spread the gospel of God. And I just don't see it. I didn't see it in the culture. I didn't see it. I saw my friends leaning into horrible paths, and I was like, I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for them. So what can I do to share the gospel in these very secular realms of the world? So like politics. And so out of nowhere, I just became very, very intrigued by the whole conversation of abortion. And that really brought me to politics, because now, as much as we like to think that, abortion is something that we need to fight culturally, it is very much tied with the political spectrum and the political realm. And so we need to be able to also fight in that sphere too. And so I would say that it was because of the pro-life movement that really brought me into politics. And then I started to see that my Christian beliefs actually aligned a lot with the conservative movement that I didn't even know existed. And I was like, wow, I found people that think like me. And I know that you said in one of your videos that it's good to have this one movement that is secular, but has basically the main values that we Christians hold. And that for me was my home.
Absolutely. That's such a great way to put it. It's interesting when you talk about the way you grew up and everything, how pretty much the odds are stacked against you as a young person growing up in this country. You have school telling you to be a leftist. You have, even maybe people in your church congregation that are telling you to maybe lean a little bit left. It's interesting to see what it is that separates the people that are thinking differently from those that aren't. In particular, with the abortion debate, what was it about that idea that made it seem like common sense to you, whereas like, let's say, I don't know, minimum wage was not as common sense? Do you think that it was a learning curve? Do you think it was strictly emotional and spiritual, or do you think that it was somewhere in between?
I think, and I think it just all came from the fact that, because even when I was younger, I mean, even if you're like, let's say 12, you still don't exactly know much about abortion. You may not know enough about the science behind the development in the womb, but I still have this conviction that life is worth fighting for at every step.
Well,
And
there's
so
this
I
there's
don't
this like
know.
emotional side of it where even as a child, you see like, let's say you're a sibling and your mom's gonna have another baby, like you see that belly and you're like, that's a human, it's a little baby that's on its way. So even from a very young age, I can see why it would be common sense for somebody to just be like, it doesn't make sense that somebody would want to end this life. It is a life already. And my personal belief, as I'm sure yours is, life starts at conception. And I think we all have a plan that's set before us, because of what the scriptures say. So when it comes to now taking an active role in this, I guess, this side of politics, where did you start? How did you get involved with these organizations that you're involved with now? What was the kind of gateway to that?
I think, again, I talk a lot about faith, and it's because I think really God is what brought me open so many doors that I didn't even expect. Uh, the doors that got opened, it was just seeds dropping everywhere. And it's just so weird how everything came together, where one day I out of nowhere, I again was so involved as being pro-life, like individually, but not really as a community, as a movement. I
I
was
see.
pro-life myself, but I didn't really know how to advocate and be an activist. And for some reason, I go on YouTube one day and I saw that it recommended me this video of this pro-life millennial called Lila Rose. And she formed this pro-life organization called the Live Action. And so it was like a 20 long something documentary about her life, what she did. And then I was like, I found someone just like me. I
Wow.
identified so much with her. I started researching her organization, her videos, uncovering Planned Parenthood, and I was like, great. In my sphere, with my friends, aside from my parents, I had nobody else who thought like me. So to
Wow.
find that somewhere else, I was like, this is my safe haven. So I started to research more, and then I was like, I'm doing it. I think it was just a conviction that God gave me that I need to be more active in this movement if I'm super passionate about it.
Right.
And so I researched more. I became an ambassador for them, and that opened the doors to learning more, the training. I didn't have that much knowledge on the abortion industry or the science behind everything. And then with the training that they provided for me, I was like, I am set. And it was just amazing. And then from there, I started to meet other organizations like Students for Life, and I feel like everything went according to what God did at that time for my life. I wasn't really forcing anything. It was just kind of everything came natural, and here we are.
That's amazing. So I want to shift gears a little bit with you. I want to go into the actual debate itself, and I want to talk to you. I want to take on devil's advocate and kind of talk to you as if I was a liberal and I'm trying to defend the pro-choice movement, right? If I were to say to you something like, "Well, I don't know. I just think every woman has the right to choose, and it's her body, and she should be able to do whatever she wants with it." What's the typical response to something like that, and why is my question phrased the wrong way, or why is it wrong, my idea?
Well, that claim is very, very generalized, that's kind of the bad thing of that certain claim, that it's the woman's choice, it's her body, her choice, because there's so many aspects that go into it. First, you can bring up the science. Well, it's not really her body because there's a living being growing inside of her. She provides the body, which is beautiful, but it's not her body. If it was her body, then her body would be the one aborted. not the babies. You can also go into the realm of saying, okay, just because it's her body, let's try to tie in with other circumstances. So if you see that your neighbor is abusing his kid, it's his kid. Does he have the right to do that just because it's theirs and, they have authority over it? And so there's a lot of aspects to that, which I think it's the most complicated, I guess, assumption to make, that it's just her body, because you can really go about it in a lot of different ways. But I would mostly just point to the fact that it is not her body. As much as he likes to think it is not, it's a separate, at the moment of conception, you have a separate human organism with unique DNA that is not fully the mom's and it's not fully the father's, but it's a unique DNA mix of both of them. You have a gender already established. The mom can't be both a mom and a guy and a boy at the same time. So it's different genders. Once the baby develops, it's developing different facial features. So now the baby has eyes. Does the mom have 4 eyes? No. And so when you actually start seeing, for example, the ultrasound, so you have the baby's head, you see the fingers, you see the arms, you see the legs, you're thinking, wait a second, this isn't just the woman's body. We're talking about another separate body growing inside of her. And I think that's why Planned Parenthood refuses, or any abortion clinic for that matter, refuses to show ultrasounds to these women getting abortions, because they will see that it's not their body.
Right. And it's an instant connection that a mother has with her child when she sees that ultrasound. It changes things. Like, I know I have friends of mine that have become parents that when they see the ultrasound, they lose it, because it's a whole nother level of intimacy now that you have with this being that's growing inside of you. Okay. Continuing to play devil's advocate. Well, what about, if a woman's being abused, I'm not going to say the R word because we're on YouTube, but if a woman is being abused and, she didn't have a choice in the matter, does that mean you're going to make her carry the baby and you're going to make her have a baby?
I think, and I've always said that those hard cases, what we classify as hard cases, are is called hard cases because they are the hardest cases to kind of convict to others why the pro-life movement is the way to go, because those are super hard. When you imagine someone going through that, it breaks my heart, because I understand, and that's why I have so much sympathy for women like that, because it would be so difficult for you to go through that horrible experience and then have a consequence, as you call it, come out of it, that's what it's seen as. But instead, it can be a blessing in disguise, and it is for many, many women. I've seen so many testimonies of women going through those horrific things and then actually finding healing through their pregnancy and through their babies. And I know Abby Johnson, she used to be a former Planned Parenthood director turned pro-life. She used to talk about how she would have these women come in, get an abortion, and then weeks later would come back in, and then they would ask them, like, how is your healing? Do you feel better? And majority of the women would say no.
Wow.
I've gone through one huge horrific tragedy, and I thought that abortion would heal me, but instead the abortion just added on to my pain, because that was another huge tragic thing that I just went through. And she was surprised at that moment, since she was pro-choice. She was so boggled at the fact that these women weren't getting healed. In fact, the abortions was just making them worse. It was hurting them and more. Made them feel more pain. Yeah. And so those hard cases are hard, but there's more in the circumstance. And I always like to say, when we think that sometimes we don't know why life happens, we don't understand why circumstances happen to us, we have to believe that stepping outside from just that little thing that we see, there's a whole plan. Yeah. There's a whole map just mapped out for us. And so when women find themselves in that circumstance, it's temporary. Yes. Right? You have the whole life. And it can be beautiful and healing to actually go through with that pregnancy. And so many mothers have actually found that it was a total blessing in disguise.
Yeah. I also think that there's a level of I guess spirituality that comes along with it, because let's say something traumatic does happen to a woman. There's countless story after story of a woman who's had something like that happen to them, and they've decided to keep the child, and that child goes up to be somebody super famous. I think most notably, for me anyway, there's a Christian singer, Israel Houghton, who was supposed to be aborted. He was supposed to be, his mom was going to abort him. Doctors were trying to convince her of that. And he ended up being one of the biggest gospel singers of like the last 50 years. You know, and to me, it's little things like that. I mean, personally, my pastor was supposed to be aborted, and then he grew, you know, now he's, you know, 35, and he's got a church of 150 people, and he's led so many people to the Lord. And it's just crazy to see. You never know what you're getting rid of when you're doing something like that. And I think it's important to understand that as well. Um, the psychological side of things on at post-abortion, I'll say, if a woman does have one, I think, I want you to ring in on this, but one of the reasons that a lot of people, in particular women on the left, have trouble with admitting to it being a human at all, or admitting to abortion being wrong, is because maybe they've had one and they haven't told anybody, and they're living with that internal guilt. Have you seen that? Is that something that you guys deal with or talk about?
Yeah. And I have, when I see sometimes celebrities championing abortion, and even if they're open to having an abortion and they feel very, the whole movement of shout your abortion, don't be embarrassed by your abortion. Abortion is a positive good now. And I think all of that, when you see that, I think that they're really just hurting inside.
Yeah.
I feel like that all comes from the fact that they don't want to admit themselves that they lost a part of themselves. And so they try to make themselves feel better, try to ease the pain
It's a
by
coping
convincing
mechanism.
themselves that it's something good.
Yeah, it's a way to cope with all of the pain and mask it, for sure. And I could see even on a larger level where the people that are pushing these ideas, shout your abortion, all this stuff, are doing it because they are seeing women have abortions and then suffer more, right? So I think that they're trying to rewire the way that we think about it to where they say, no, this is healthy, this is good, and this is desirable, instead of, no, this is going to be a trauma that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. I know in my own life, people in my circle throughout the years, I've known people that have had abortions, and they've without exception have been miserable about it. And to some extent, unless they became Christians and they asked God for forgiveness, they're still miserable about it. And that to me is one of the things that I think is fascinating about this debate, and probably the reason that it stuck out to you is because it is where that merger of morality and politics really comes to a head, and it really is half morality, half political. We can legislate these things, but it's not going to change the morality of them. What do you think is a solution legislatively for something like this? Do you think abortion should be banned? Do you think, what are the suggestions?
I think that, of course, the movement is heading towards the side of course, politics and legislation and all of that. The situation that's happening in the country doesn't necessarily have to deal that much with the legislation and political side of it.
Mm.
I'll go back on that in a sec. What I want to focus on is the culture side of it, because even when you have these legislations, Roe versus Wade is overturned. I think I have a non-popular opinion that suggests that I feel like most states would ban abortions or would have a lot of restrictions on it. So I feel like that would be good. But I feel like there would be still people trying to combat this, trying to fight it. And so first and foremost, I think that the first step to it is changing culture first. Because right when culture is changing and honestly understands the situation, we can have a real conversation about it, then the legislation will take place.
Yeah.
Because I feel it will just, we see that now with so many states having these pro-life laws, which is so good. More states should have it. More states. Roe versus Wade should definitely be overturned. But you see people who are still not understanding it. And then you have that backlash with like, oh, these pro-lifers are trying to take this. And it's still a conflict, a huge conflict. And I think first is culturally changing the morality of this issue, the way people are thinking about this. And I think that's the first step. Also, I think there's so much more that we can do politically to actually defend the lives of the unborn. I know that, the Republican Party stands as being like the pro-life party,
Yeah.
but I still think that they need a little bit of a push to actually get the legislation out, because, I mean, I could just be missing the whole point right here, but I don't think it's that hard. I've always said, to be a good politician, you were elected for a certain thing, and so you are the voice of the people that elected you. And some politicians go in there, they probably campaign their whole thing on getting the pro-life vote, go inside and do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, and I am registered a Republican. I'm loyal to the conservative movement, but I will also call out the politicians who use the pro-life vote in order to get votes and not actually do anything to further our movement in politics. And so that's a huge step back. And I think that we need to put more of our senators, representatives, our presidents to step up to the plate. We have expectations of them to be right here. No, they need to be right here. And if they don't cut it, then you just kick them out of office.
Absolutely. I agree with that so much. I think that's been one of the big revelations that come after the Trump presidency has been, okay, now we need to pick people that will actually do what they're saying they're going to do and not be afraid to say that as well, because they've shamed Trump so much that now anybody that's running after him, they're either one of two camps. They're either aggressively America First MAGA patriots, or they're aggressively, rhino Republicans trying to go back to the George Bush era. And there's nowhere in between. And there's nobody that just says, I'm going to do what's morally correct, and I want to see those things be furthered, and I want to be the voice for the people that voted for me. And I do think that we need to kind of take away this whole influencer style politics thing and really just go with the merit-based politics, where we elect the people that have the best resume and that have the best track record, instead of who has the most followers on Instagram, or TikTok for that matter.
Yeah, and you hit a good point on that, is that and it's good. And I've always said, because for a long time now, I've had this desire. First, when I was growing up, I always was intrigued by law. And so I always said, even though I was like 12 years old, I'm going to be an attorney. I love law. When I started to get into politics, I'm like, I want to run for office, because I don't see enough people doing what, I just see them sit back in their offices doing absolutely nothing. And I'm like, I could be doing something, right now, I don't have that special power. Yeah, I can probably make a few videos on Instagram, hope that somebody who maybe doesn't agree will have their mind open by it. But I want to be right there. I want to actually be doing the legislation. And so I've had this conviction of running for public office one day. And I think that is, you hit it right on point, where we shouldn't elect people because they look nice or whatever. They have the most followers and they do this. What have they actually done in their history?
Right.
Are they the type of people that will sway from side to side according to what benefits them? I think as a lot of people, if we really see the track records of these senators and representatives right now, we would be a little bit, conflicted if we really liked them, because most of them, or majority of them, haven't been consistent on their views. Through years in office, I feel like they just end up losing them. We can talk about the Supreme Court judges as well. They too have this drive to actually go away from their convictions and what the Constitution says to do more what benefits them politically. And so
Absolutely.
It's tough. It's tough, but I just don't think it's that hard to be a good politician.
No, and thank God, because of all this stuff that's happening, there are people like that standing up. I interviewed somebody, I forget his last name, it's Willie, but he's running in Florida, and I spent maybe half an hour talking to him on the podcast. Should be up by the time this is up. And what he mentioned was he's not waiting to get elected to do anything. He's already in ministry. He's already doing these what are they? They're like little seminars for young men to teach them how to properly engage with the world, to teach them how to get jobs or mentorship, all that stuff. He's helping to stop human trafficking in Florida in specific. He has all these organizations that are already up and running, and all he wants to get elected for is to do the legislation. Like you said, he doesn't rely on the legislation to change anything, but him getting to that place would help drastically, right? And it would help the legal system. So I think you're so spot on, and I think that we need more people like you. All I ask is that when you decide to run, you come back on my show and you announce it here, so I get the scoop. That's all I want.
I definitely will.
Very cool. Well, I want to give you the floor now. We're about to run up on half an hour. I want to give you the floor, let you tell people where they can find your stuff, anything you want to tell them, what's your message to the world, like Candace Owen says, and make sure you drop your Instagram and all that.
Of course. Well, my whole thing, I think if I had one theme, it would be to rebuild culture. I think, stepping aside, just not just from the pro-life perspective, but in every single thing. Morality is something that has really been slipping up. And I think that in order to build a great country, a great foundation, you have to have morality. Most important, you have to have God in it, or every country is doomed to failure. And we've seen it throughout history, doomed to failure. And so my whole thing is about rebuilding that morality, rebuilding back that culture that God really wants us to make, and that culture that's going to be successful for a country and for everyone involved. And so I have a podcast actually called Rebuilding Culture, because that is my message. And so I talk about a lot of things, not just in the pro-life movement, but politics, anything. And so we have like really, controversial discussions, which is fine. I love that. I love open dialogue. I love these things. I live for these things. But yeah, so you can find me on there. You can find me on my Instagram at Lala Rami with 2 eyes at the end. I'm really active on there. I do a lot of, I like to think that I'm doing educational things, not using Instagram for personal benefit, but I really do that to just get my message out in hopes that someone who may not think like me will see it and have their minds and hearts changed.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll be in touch.